My name is Julian Bond. I'm director of the National Christian Muslim Forum, which was launched in 2006 and exists to bring Christians and Muslims together for better understanding and better relationships, to look at what we can do together practically for the benefit of Christians, Muslims and the whole of society. I'm a Methodist, and this is the church that I attend. In my work I engage with Christians of different denominations and Muslims of different denominations, Sunnis, Shias, Deobandis, Brahvis. He was killed, martyred by one of the early caliphs, who seems not to have respected the household of the Prophet. And raises some difficult issues about the relationship between faith and politics and power. And these are still live issues today, even in this country. How do we balance the political with the religious? And Hussein stands out because he wouldn't yield to the political power. He wouldn't acknowledge the ruler, the caliph, because he thought that he was not a good Muslim and that he wasn't establishing Islam in the caliphate. I think the first time I heard about Imam Hussein was when the Clapham and Stockwell Faith Forum and some other interfaith groups had arranged a day to compare the sufferings of Hussein and the sufferings of Christ. I think that probably was the first time I became aware of him. I have a Shia friend who used to live quite near here, and late one night after I'd been doing an interfaith session at one of the Methodist churches, I went back to his house and he gave me a crash course in Shia Islam. And then I've read a little more recently, and it's tremendously sad to read. His message was basically one of peace, sort of re-establishing the message that Muhammad came with, rejecting the evil and commending the good, and looking after the less privileged and the oppressed in society. It resonates with me, the message of faith standing up to unjust power. So it resonates with the trial of Jesus before Pontius Pilate, where he says, I have authority to put you to death. And Jesus says to him, well, where did you get that authority? And the difficult relationship that faith and politics and power have with each other. And very often in this society, all kinds of societies, we're very interested in politics and power and status. And Hussein and Jesus tell us, well, none of those things really matter. The things that are simple, which respect others, which are kind to others, which build up society, which take note of those who are oppressed and marginalised and discriminated against. And we look at our structures and they don't seem to care for those people. I think he also tells us to be wary of power and to challenge it. So some of the non-conformist traditions of Christianity, like Methodism and the Baptists, have a strong strand of being different, of challenging society. So one of the things that John Wesley did was to challenge the alcohol culture in this country in the 18th century, to campaign on serious civil issues. You'll have heard of the Salvation Army as well. William Booth, who started them up. He was a Methodist, so he came from that strong tradition, and he saw that there were many homeless people around who were not being cared for by anyone, and set up the Salvation Army as a mission, if you like, to reach out to those people. And I see that in the life of Imam Hussein and the way he received people, the way he preached and shared the message of Islam, which, as I understand it, is not about power and dominance, but about responding to God and showing God's compassion and mercy to others. I think the message of Imam Hussein is really important, the message of peace and love for the message of love in Islam is there and is in the life of Imam Hussein, and I don't think we hear enough about it. What I take from Muslim friends is how they look at the example of Jesus and how Jesus' message is one of love. And they would see that as being part of their tradition. So I think we need to spend more time as Christians and Muslims focusing on how the centrality of love for God and God's love in our traditions. One of the things I read was that the mercy that God has given to human beings is 1% of God's total mercy, and that God has saved the other 99% for the day of judgment. And these are the striking things that we, as non-Muslims, learn about Islam, and we all need to be able to share more about the love in our traditions. And Imam Hussein and Jesus Christ give us good examples of how we can do it. We need to be able to get across the more positive message, and I think in order to do that we need to hold on to our theology and our scriptures, but put the example of our prophets first and say, this was the example of Jesus Christ, this is his life from the Gospels, or these are the narrations that we have of Imam Hussein, and this was his life, and share that message of love and peace and hopefully reconciliation. We don't need to be so fixed within our own tradition that we can't learn and that we can't share and we can't encourage each other. So seeing the love that Shias have for Imam Hussein and that Muslims generally have for the Prophet, then that is a good encouragement and incentive. And the example of Jesus in the Gospels, who showed love to anyone that was open to it, whatever their background, and with very simple words. So one of the good examples in the Gospels, there was a tax collector who was short. He climbed a tree to see Jesus, and Jesus said, well, come down, I'm coming to your house for tea. And that was how he showed love, and that man's life was transformed. I'd encourage all your viewers and Christians and Muslims to read each other's stories, to read each other's scriptures, to learn about each other's key figures and prophets, and do it in the spirit of love. Focus on the prophets, the figures, and engage with them as people rather than books of theology and verses of scripture. And it would be great to get people to know and understand more about the Prophet Muhammad and his family, and that is a big challenge for Christians.